Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Level Up English podcast, the best place to come to practice the English language, learn about the British accent and culture with me, your host, Michael Lavers. Hope you're having a wonderful week so far, a lovely sunny week, or maybe rainy, I don't know, whatever the weather is, hopefully it's good. For me, I love to see the sun, it just makes me happy, but I know that's not the case for all of you. But whatever the case is, hopefully you're ready today to learn about some differences between the UK, the United Kingdom, and the US, the United States of America. So this hopefully will be interesting. I know that there are a lot of differences between both varieties of English. I think it's important to say that generally we can understand each other with no problems. I've never really had difficulty understanding what American people say, not really, and I think the same goes in reverse. If not, I think it will be obvious from context. I suppose there have been a couple times where I didn't really know what an American person was saying on like some specific topic or area, but based on the context, it's usually possible to guess what they mean. So the differences aren't so big. Although I would quite confidently guess that generally British people can understand Americans more than Americans can understand British. And I think the main reason is because we hear American accents all the time on TV, radio, music, all this kind of stuff where we always are exposed to American accents. And maybe for you, you feel the same. Maybe you feel the American accent is much easier because you may have been exposed to it much more. And that's also the case for me. It's not the case for me. I guess in some cases it would be true for me. Of course, British is easier because I'm British. But if we're comparing like the Irish accent and the American accent, I think American might be easier for me because I've heard it much more in my life. So that might be a surprise to some people there. But yeah, my goal today is not to make a simple video like looking at, cookie, biscuit, trousers, pants, these vocab differences between American and British English. There are already plenty of them. If you Google that or you look on YouTube, there are so many examples of this already. So I don't think it's really helpful for me to make a new one. And, Instagram is another place. You see these all the time on Instagram, just comparing British and American English. I will say you do have to be careful because I often, all the time actually, see Instagram posts like this, like here's British, here's American, and sometimes it's totally wrong. I don't know where they got the information from, but it's totally wrong. And usually these are accounts with millions of followers and they're just kind of reposting other people's content. But yeah, I think you have to be careful who you're learning from because a lot of the time they are not accurate. And I'll be honest, it does annoy me a little bit when they've got so many followers and they're posting such lazy content. When I say lazy, I mean reposted from other pages. It's not even their own content. But anyway, I'm not bitter, I promise. So anyway, today I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to compare some different terms, some different words in the UK and the US and make comments on what these words say about the cultural differences in each country, the cultural significance of each one. Because sometimes the words are simply just words. Like if you look at jumper and sweater, jumper is British, sweater is American. This refers to the piece of clothing you put over your t-shirt or your shirt to keep you warm, maybe. And as far as I know, they're the same thing. There's no difference between them. And there's a historical difference, like where the word comes from, but it doesn't say much about the culture, as far as I know. And in other cases, the words can reflect the culture a little bit more. Like our first example today, which will be pub and bar. So we'll look at that in just a second. So hopefully this will be an interesting podcast so you can learn about these differences and also get a little bit of an insight into culture. And I should just say one last thing before we get started is, of course, I am from the UK. I've only been to America for like 3 weeks in my whole life in one city. So my knowledge of American culture is much smaller, right? So if I do, if I miss something, let's say on the US side, then please let me know. But I'm definitely more knowledgeable about the UK side. So yeah, as I said, let's start with pub and bar. These are sometimes said to be the same, the equivalents, but it's not quite that simple. Pub is a word used in the UK, short for public house, you may not have known. But a pub is where you go and you can get some alcohol, some drinks, and just relax. And a bar is often used in the US, and it's kind of similar. In the UK, a pub is more of a communal space where people get together. It's often family friendly as well, which is surprising for some people. You can even bring your children to many pubs. Many pubs will serve food as well as drinks. And when I think of a pub, I think of like nice, comfortable sofa chairs, like comfortable cushioned chairs, maybe a fireplace that can be lit in the winter, lots of kind of wooden things, like very old buildings. So there's like wooden beams and very kind of cozy feeling. It feels almost like you're in your grandma's living room sometimes. Yeah, there's a lot of focus on socializing and maybe drinking while doing so. And that's a big thing in the UK. There's a pub on every street, basically. In the US, as far as I know, they don't really have this pub culture so much. You might have like pubs, but they might be like Irish pubs or English pubs. They're kind of specifically made to look like the pubs we have in the UK. And as far as I know, Americans, when they want to get a drink, they might go to a bar, right? So a bar is the name of the building where they go to, and it serves drinks. This is, I think generally, of course there's a lot of variation, but generally a bar in the US has more focus on the drinks themselves, and they might have loud music playing. It might be more modern or trendy, more focused on nightlife. You could have like a dance floor, for example. I think it kind of depends. Or a sports bar is another common type of bar where people go to watch sports. But yeah, often they're more modern and they're more focused on drinking. In the UK, we do use the word bar, but usually it's not a building. A bar in the UK is the specific table, the place where drinks are served. So you will sit at the bar and order your drink. But inside a pub, there will be a bar, for example. American English, maybe they have the same. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, generally that word for bar in the US English is more about the place, right? And I think, again, I'm just going to focus on UK here because I'm not totally sure if Americans would say this, but in the UK, we often use like the word club or nightclub as well. So there's kind of two distinct ways of getting alcohol. You have a pub, which is more relaxing. Again, you can get food, play darts, play pool, maybe, meet friends. And a nightclub or a club where you can, get drunk, go dancing, loud music, that kind of place. So generally, clubs are for younger people, pubs are for older people. Right? Again, pubs can be family friendly, but if you go into a pub, the people you'll see will generally be older, let's say on average, we could say. So, small difference there. They're kind of similar words, but it reflects something about the culture as well. I don't know much about the history of the pub, but I know it's a very old thing that goes back into the old days of England and the UK. And yeah, it's a very, very special place. I think a lot of Americans quite like the idea of a pub. So maybe it will become more common in the US in the future. The second one is an idea that I had, which is a corner shop and a convenience store. So these are not exactly words that are used to represent one another, but I do think they're kind of the equivalent in each culture. So a corner shop is the word we use in British English. And typically, where do you think this would be? Right, usually on the corner. So this, I think, says something about the way that British towns are laid out. As far as I know, in America, they have a lot more like zoning regulations. So you might have a very large area with residential housing and no stores. And then you have an area with more stores and offices, for example. In the UK, it's much more mixed. It's very common to have a street mixed with houses and shops all together. It's quite jumbled up, we could say. And if you go to like a residential area in a UK town, it's very common for each kind of area to have a corner shop, right? So this is on the corner of the street. There'll be like a little shop and they sell all sorts of things, alcohol, of course. They might sell like snacks, sandwiches, basic kitchen stuff like cans of food and bread and milk. Small area for frozen and refrigerated food. Usually these are more expensive than the big supermarkets, but they're there for convenience. And that is where the US phrase comes in, right? Convenience store, right? And these are usually, as far as I know, they're part of like a larger chain, like 7-Eleven, for example. They might have them near gas stations or highways. And a lot of them will cater for drivers, right? Cater for means they're kind of made for someone. They cater for people driving rather than pedestrians in many places. So a lot of these kind of stores might have car parks, or we'll come to this later maybe, but a parking lot, a car park where you can park up your car and drive into. Many corner shops in the UK, they don't have any parking because they cater for pedestrians. They cater for people walking. So I think, to me, this kind of small difference suggests something about the way that things are laid out, right? Generally, the UK is more focused on walking, at least compared to America. And a lot of UK towns, we value a walkable town. We like the idea that you can walk from your house to the shops. And that's why a lot of these corner shops are small and they're in residential areas and they don't have parking. Because the idea is you can, you're sitting at home and you go, I forgot to buy milk. And you can walk 5 minutes down the street to the corner shop and get your milk. Right, so that's kind of the purpose there. And I think in the US, again, it's more focused on driving. Walkability is how easy you can walk in a place is not a big priority in many places in the US because they drive everywhere, right? So they might have a huge shopping mall with lots of parking rather than many, many corner shops. That is my understanding anyway. So let's move on to another one then. Number 3 is kind of a road one. Again, you're kind of noticing maybe that these are not everyday things. They're not like cookie and biscuit. So hopefully I'm sharing something you didn't know before. That's one of my goals here. Now, when it comes to driving, whether we're talking about cars or roads, there are so many differences between US and UK English. And one of them is what we call a junction. This is a UK word. It does exist in American English, I believe, but the meaning, I think, is different. But when we're talking about this thing on a road, a junction is when one road joins another. And there are different types of junctions, like a T-junction, you can maybe guess, is when one smaller road comes up to a bigger road, and it makes a T shape, right? And there are different types. I can't think of any other names now, but I'm not a big driver in the UK. But yeah, junction is basically when roads join together. In America, they might more commonly use the word intersection to mean kind of the same thing. Another word that's commonly used in America, which is not common in the UK, is crossroads. Crossroads. This is when roads cross. If you imagine like a crossroad, like almost like a plus symbol, like it goes horizontal and vertical. They cross together. And again, I think this is a little bit like the last one. It just says something about the layout of towns and road systems in each country. The US, they love to make their grids. I think when they first, when we first went to the US, we were like, look at all this empty land. We can make this however we want to. It was a blank slate, which means they're starting from the beginning. So they decided to make it logical and grid everything out very logically. Personally, I don't like that. I think it's very boring. I quite like the way we do towns and cities in the UK, where there's windy paths and it's not logical, but every road kind of tells you something about the history. Like the reason that this road goes left and curves around, maybe there was some historical thing. It was going around a tree 100 years ago. I don't know. But I quite like that. But yes, intersect. To intersect means kind of to cross over. And it sounds to me more like a grid, more logical, an intersection. When I think of an intersection, I do think of a very like vertical and horizontal grid, like the roads in the US. In the UK, it's not so common to have that. And of course, another thing that we have in the UK, much more, are roundabouts. It's actually not super common to have a crossroad in the UK where, four roads or two roads, I suppose, come together to meet in a cross. That's not so common because usually in the UK, when you have 3, 4, or 5 roads joining together, it will be in a roundabout to help control the traffic a bit better. So I guess that's all I have to say on that one. But I think that's interesting. I think it says something about the roads. And again, I haven't spent much time in the US, but I just don't like the road system in the US at all. I think the key is, as I said before, it really benefits the drivers. If you're a driver in the US, I imagine it's very good. The roads are big, they're easy to drive on. But if you're a pedestrian, if you're a person, it's not so good. I remember in the US waiting for so long at the traffic lights to wait for the green man so I could cross. Whereas in the UK, if you press the traffic light button, it will go green usually within a few seconds. You don't have to wait very long. So I really think the UK is the best one there. But of course, I am biased. Okay, let's get into some more, maybe at least more everyday ones now. I'm not sure. I guess, honestly, this is quite similar. This is looking not into roads, but into houses now. The difference between a garden and a yard. Garden and yard. Right, so my understanding is that garden is the British word. Yard is the American word. Let's go to the UK first. Garden is the green area. It could be either in front of or behind your house. You might have a front garden and a back garden. And I think in most people's houses, the back garden has more privacy. It might be bigger and therefore more beautiful as well. A lot of people neglect or ignore their front gardens, or many people will turn their front gardens into a driveway, which is kind of sad. They're getting rid of all the greenery. But yeah, a garden in the UK, when you think of a UK garden, you think of a green space with flowers. It's often quite well maintained. It might have a lawn. A lawn, Lawn, is an area with grass that you cut. And even in small homes, you can have a small garden. Right, so the name for the land outside your house in the UK is a garden. In the US, they might use the word yard. Backyard, front yard, similar way, but they'll say yard instead. And this, I think, is a bit more general. in the US. It can be used in many different contexts. But when we're talking about a house, it doesn't necessarily make you think of a place with flowers and a place, with, as I said before, like a beautiful place with flowers and a pond, maybe like a lot of UK gardens might have. It might just be like an open, grassy area. And yeah, my understanding in American English is that they also use the word garden, but to them, a garden is more like a public garden, or a garden that you pay to visit. You want to spend time in a garden with flowers and stuff like that. Yeah, I think like even my house in the UK, we have a garden, but it's all concrete. So there's no grass, there's no flowers, yet I would still call it a garden because that's the garden area. And in the US, I think they would say a garden has to have flowers and it has to be this kind of place. But usually a garden does not refer to the green or space in front or behind your house in the US. And yeah, I think also you may be aware there's a big difference here. US, they generally, they quite value their space and their privacy and their freedom. So they have, again, this is kind of the typical American house. I know many houses are not like this, but they might have a really, really big yard, mostly just grass, mostly just lawn area, very empty. And they take a lot of pride in keeping that grass looking nice. And that's quite different to the typical UK garden, which is much more generally smaller, right? And rather than showing off in size, we're not saying, look how big my yard is. We're showing off in its beauty. Right? I think that's one difference between the UK and the US. Again, it's a generalization. Not everyone is the same, but yeah, in the UK, you'll always know like the person who takes the most pride in their garden when they've got flowers everywhere. They might have a garden gnome, like a little magical statue of a man. They might have a pond. They might have a bench they can sit on and relax in the garden, and all that kind of stuff. Maybe again, I'll put some pictures on YouTube to show you kind of what I'm talking about if you're not sure. But yeah, I'd love to hear, how do these compare to your country? In your country, do you have more like a British style garden or an American style yard? Or maybe something very different from both of them? Or maybe you tend to live in apartments or flats and you don't have room for a garden, which is kind of like me at the moment. I really miss having a garden. That's one good thing about the UK. But okay, let's go to number 5 now. We've got a couple more to go. Hopefully it's interesting for you. I love these differences. Hope you do as well. Dressing gown versus bathrobe. So this is kind of similar, but also kind of different. So I do think they're used differently. Let's go to UK first. A dressing gown. It sounds very fancy. It sounds very kind of upper class, but it's really not. A dressing gown is like a robe, a loose robe that you wear at home. It can be worn after you have a bath or shower. It's often worn over pajamas as well. It might be for keeping you warm or comfortable. It's kind of like wearing a blanket over you that you tie at your waist. It does keep you very comfortable. So that's one good thing. And yeah, as I said, some people might wear it after they have a shower, but some people might just wear it all day. That's very common that people wear it all day. If they're not leaving the house, they might just wear the dressing gown for the whole day. And they might wear pajamas underneath. Maybe it's for comfort, or maybe their pajamas are a little bit too revealing. They don't want to show too much of their body, so they have to cover up, whether you're a man or a woman. But yeah, I think that's one thing. So this is something that I never do. I mean, I'm a big advocate of putting on clothes after you wake up. Like for me, it's just a mindset thing. It helps me feel like I'm awake, I'm ready to work, I'm ready for the day. If I stay the whole day in pajamas or dressing gown, I still feel like I'm in a sleepy, lazy mood. And I don't like that feeling. Unless I'm sick. But yes, sometimes you will see in the UK people will come out into their garden, chat with the neighbors. They'll go, put the bins out on the driveway, and they will do this while wearing a dressing gown. So they will go outside in the dressing gown. It's quite common to see that. My understanding is that in the US, this would be a bit more strange. I'm not totally sure, but that's my understanding. Especially with this topic, my American understanding is much more based on movies, so it may not be totally accurate. But the American equivalent to a dressing gown is called a bathrobe. So they have that word robe in there that kind of refers to the type of clothing, like a Jedi robe, if you know Star Wars. But it's kind of the same thing, but very often it's more absorbent. So it's kind of like a towel texture. In the UK, they might be more colourful or they might look different. And they might be fluffier and comfortable to wear. Whereas in the US, the bathrobe might be more like a towel to help absorb the water that's still on your body after you have a shower or a bath. So my understanding is in the US, it's more common to wear it only after you have a bath, when you're clean. Maybe before bedtime, or before you put on your clothes in the morning, but they wouldn't wear it for the whole day. Again, I might be wrong, but that's my understanding based on what I've read online for this research, and also based on movies. So may not be accurate, but I think there is a difference there as well. But yeah, again, let me know what your country does. Do you have some kind of dressing gown? Would you spend your whole day in the dressing gown? Would you even go outside wearing it? I would never do that, but let me know what you would do. Okay, let's do 3 more now. I mentioned this one before. We've got a lot here today about kind of layouts and towns and stuff like that. But this one I think is quite a big one. This is car park versus parking lot. Now, these are kind of the same thing. Right? In the UK, if you leave your car somewhere with lots of other cars, that place is called a car park. I remember when I was a baby, I couldn't pronounce this and I would say parkark, but I've come a long way since then. So car park. This is just a special place where you leave your car. Usually, especially in larger towns and cities, you have to pay per hour to use the car park. And the US word is parking lot. Parking lot. So there is a slight cultural difference here, where I think there's many reasons for this. So let's go to US first. Parking lot. Lot is a noun in this case, and it means kind of a plot of land, an area of land used for a particular purpose. So this lot is for sale, we could say. Or if no one is living there, you can say this is a vacant lot. Vacant means empty. No one is living there. A parking lot is a lot, an area of land for parking. So it kind of makes sense, right? It's logical. But US cities tend to have huge parking lots because of their driving culture, their zoning rules. They'll have a big residential area, and then they'll drive into the shopping area, like Walmart they might go to, and there's a huge parking lot because everyone is driving there. In the UK, there's usually a car park for like a supermarket, but then often there are also paths, pavements, for pedestrian access. So you could very easily walk to most supermarkets in the UK. And I think for that reason, a lot of the car parks are not as big. But also it's just the land available, right? US is a much bigger country with more land, so they have given much more room to parking lots as well. And I don't know if this is exactly true. Of course, a lot could be any size. A lot, like a piece of land could be any size. But to me, I feel like a lot sounds much bigger. Like a car park, it could be very small. You could have a car park outside a corner shop or a pub that maybe just has 2 spaces, and that could still be called a car park. But to me, when I hear the word parking lot, I think of a huge area of land specifically designed for parking. And yeah, it's quite ugly, I think, just looking at big parking lots, but because of the way that the US is structured in most places, it's designed to have people drive there. So they need lots of space for parking lots. So yeah, one interesting difference there. Let's go inside the house now. We've been jumping around from houses to towns and cities. Now let's go inside and have a look in their pantries. So I said pantry because this is the US word, the American word. Pantry is usually kind of like a cupboard or a storage space to keep food. And the British equivalent to this is a larder. Larder. L-A-R-D-E-R. Larder. And the UK term larder comes from older homes before refrigeration. So before we had fridges, we would have a larder where you'd keep food in a cool place in the house, not near a window, for example. And this is where you could store food for longer in your larder. And I honestly haven't heard this word for a long time. I think maybe thinking back to my grandparents' house when I was younger, they had a very old house, and I think they may have had a larder, if I can remember correctly. But yeah, generally, we don't really use this word anymore in the UK. We would of course, we'll use a fridge, just like the Americans would. But also we'll use cupboards, right? We'll just put our food in the cupboards. And that's how we do it. My understanding of the US is the word pantry is still used, even though it may not be so big in modern homes. So pantry or larder basically are places where you store food. But yeah, larder is rarely used in the UK anymore, and pantry is still used in the US. In big homes in the US, they might have a pantry where you have like a room. You can walk into the room and you've got shelves of cans of food and food that doesn't need to be frozen or refrigerated. So in very big houses, you might have a full-sized pantry. But also I have seen smaller, basically cupboards, just like we do in the UK. They might have a cupboard of food, but they would call the cupboard the pantry. So even though it doesn't look like the original pantry, they might say that as well. So there's some difference here. It's quite interesting to see how it changes. But yes, pantry is still very commonly used. And this last one, I'm really glad I thought of this one because I think this is a great example. It says something about the character of each nationality, I believe. And this is the difference between toilet in the UK and there are a few different words in the US to talk about this. Washroom, restroom, bathroom, even some stranger ones like little boy's room, little girl's room, a little bit strange. And powder room as well. I've got an American friend who says powder room, which is a funny one. So yeah, in the UK, we say toilet. And when we say toilet, we're not talking about the bowl that you use to go to the bathroom. We're talking about the room itself. The whole room we can call a toilet, right? That room. So whether you're at home or you're in a shopping mall, shopping center, you can say, excuse me, where is the toilet? And that is totally fine in British English. When we say toilet, we're not thinking about the actual toilet bowl, okay? However, in America, they don't like to use the word toilet. To them, toilet might sound a bit too vulgar. I do feel like in many ways, Americans can be a bit uncomfortable, perhaps, with some of these words. So they'll try to kind of make it less direct. So that's exactly why a lot of Americans might say the little boy's room, because they're not saying what they're going to do. They're not saying they want to go for a wee. They're not saying exactly what... They're kind of being quite ambiguous about it, not direct. And I think Americans tend to do that a little bit more. Whereas in the UK, we might just say what we're doing. Like, I'm going to go have a pee, right? Pee is another word for wee. Right? We might just say that. And I think Americans might find that a bit strange generally. So that they will say all these words to make it less obvious. You know, like washroom, where you go to wash. Restroom, apparently I looked online. Restroom comes from, I think, like department stores maybe, or old stores where they used to have like sofas and resting places in the bathroom as well. But they often just say restroom to mean a toilet. Bathroom as well. Even if there is no bath, they might say bathroom. I've gotten into the habit of saying bathroom now because I speak to many Americans, so it's kind of my habit. And yeah, powder room, I believe powder is referring to makeup. Like it's the room you go to powder your face, to put on some makeup. So I feel like Americans will do anything they can to avoid using the word toilet. Whereas in the UK, we don't care. We just say, I'm going to use the toilet. I'm going to go to the toilet, right? So that's quite a funny difference. But if you want to be a little bit more polite in the UK, you could also say bathroom as well. But it might be a bit strange if there is no bath. So that's one funny difference there. But okay, I think I will leave my list there. So we had a few different ones today. I will summarize these on the blog post, which you can find at levelupenglish.school/podcast317. Let me know if you found it interesting. It's a little bit different. I wanted to explain these words and add some cultural aspects to it as well. Honestly, it was quite hard to think of some because a lot of the words are just quite similar. There's not a big difference in meaning. So let me know if you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any more comments. Let me know if you're maybe if you have more familiarity with the American side and you want to add something to what I said. That would be great as well. But I think we'll leave it there. So I'm going to say a thank you to 2 comments. I don't have any reviews today, so if you want to leave a review, you can. But I'm going to go to Spotify comments today and say one thank you to Terka. I'm probably pronouncing your name very wrong. I apologize. But this is on the episode with Teacher Stenek. And Terka said, "Hi, Michael. I'm an advanced learner from the Czech Republic. And it made my day when I listened to this episode. Your podcast has really improved my vocabulary. I love it. Thank you." Well, thank you very much, Terka. That means a lot to me. I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and I'm glad that you could also hear your fellow countrymen on the episode as well. So yeah, thanks for the comment. And one more on episode 311 about building habits from Marta, who said, "I really enjoy listening to this podcast. I'm really into the topic of habits, and I love tracking my habits and attaching new habits to my old ones. For example, every time I go for a walk with my dog, I do some lessons with my Duolingo, or when I come back from my work, I listen to your podcasts." Thank you so much. That's a great habit. I think if you can use my podcasts in your habit, that would be amazing. Kind of selfishly recommending that. But yeah, I do a very similar thing. Just for fun, I love to study geography, like flags, capital cities of countries and stuff like that. So when I go to the gym, that's one healthy habit I have. When I'm resting in between my workout, I will study the countries and the flags on my phone. So that's kind of accidentally become my habit. So I'm training my body and my brain in one. So I think that's it's a great idea. So yeah, I'm glad you're doing that as well, Marta, in a similar way. So thank you both of you for those comments. Now, for the quote section today, I wanted to share 2 quotes. My goal here is to share a quote from each country, US and UK, that represents the culture in some way. And I think you'll see what I mean. So this first one is from Patrick Henry in 1775. "Give me liberty or give me death." Right, give me liberty or give me death. Very strong, but I think this really highlights the American love for freedom and independence, right? It's a very big part of American culture is freedom, or liberty is another word for freedom. So that's the American one. The UK one you may have heard before. "Keep calm and carry on." This comes from, World War II British propaganda, and this kind of represents the attitude of British people. It's like, no matter what happens, just stay composed, stay calm, keep going, don't let it affect you, right? And you'll see that a lot even today in UK, British culture, where people, you might have some really bad news where an American person or another person might just go like, oh no, this is horrible, what am I going to do? And a British person might go like, yeah, that's a bit annoying, isn't it? Oh well, should we go to the pub? Kind of like hiding their true annoyances, their true anger or frustration. May not be healthy in every case, but it's often done. So there's some quotes there to end on. Not really motivational, but hopefully it says something about the cultures. Okay, well, thank you so much for watching or listening today. Hope you learned something new. Hope you had fun. I will see all of you in the next episode. Goodbye. You have been listening to the Level Up English podcast. If you would like to leave a question to be answered on a future episode, then please go to levelupenglish.school/podcast. That's levelupenglish.school/podcast. And I'll answer your question on a future episode. Thanks for listening.